Folks, the NHL season is right around the corner, so I want to go through every team before the season started and go through one player that I think is most important or a massive X factor for the team heading in. These could be players that I think could end up being the MVP for the team, or just the players that I think need to show up for the team to succeed expectations. Let's start out today's ranking in the Central Division, starting with the Chicago Blackhawks and a player that is going to have a ton of weight on his shoulders, and that is Spencer Knight in goal. Now, there's a few players I think could end up being X factors for Chicago. Connor Bedard's improvement would be massive. Sam Rinzel, I think, is going to be huge. But one that I think is kind of getting not as talked about as maybe he should is Spencer Knight. Somebody that I think is vitally important for the future of this Blackhawks team. At 24 years old, this is the time where I think Knight really needs to start showing up. And as a former 13th overall pick, the expectations, of course, are pretty massive. Being acquired in that Seth Jones trade, he's somebody that has had some ups and downs, some good moments. And for Florida this last year in 23 games, got a .907 save percentage. In Chicago, started out really good, teetered off a little bit in those last few games, but still ended up with an .896, which in Chicago's system ain't the worst thing in the world. But I think this is the year that Knight really needs to show that he is a definitive starter for the future, or at least play starter games. I'm not expecting a .920 save percentage in Chicago or anything, but give me something to latch on to, man, because I think Knight's potential has always been there. It's just about seizing it, and right now the opportunity is his for the taking. Onto the Colorado Avalanche and their X factor for 2026. I have to go for Valeri Nichushkin here. Now, you could easily go for Gabriel Landeskog, and pretty easily I could see why you'd go for him. But Nichushkin is somebody that I think is kind of inconsistent when it comes to his health, especially, and that's kind of held him back in a lot of ways, because when he has been healthy, he's put up some fantastic production for Colorado. But you can see, since he's entered Colorado, he hasn't played more than 65 games in a regular season, which is shocking, but it's true. He's somebody that just has not been able to have a fully healthy, fully consistent 82-game season, and if he does, I think that would do wonders for the Avs' depth. And as you guys can see, even in 43 games last year, he still got 21 goals, 34 points when he was super under the radar, still put up great production for the Avs. If he's fully healthy, if he's ready to go, that changes that core completely. Next, we go into my favorite team in the Dallas Stars, and their X factor for me comes on the defense. Not really that surprising, but it's Nils Lundkvist here, and especially with the Stars shedding a lot of cap room, having guys like Matthew Dumba leave the team, for example, they have a lot more work to do on that defense to solidify things, and this is really the year that I think Nils Lundkvist needs to show up, or else his NHL career, I think, is pretty much over. Another smaller puck mover out of Europe that has had some great potential, but just has not been able to stick in the lineup, whether that be for the Rangers or for the Stars. Only played 39 games this last year, getting 5 assists for 5 points, and I thought he looked pretty okay, but not quite at the level I wanted to see out of him. But this is the year I think he really needs to show out to break out at least into a top 4, top 6 role, and at least play every single game, at least be the top 6 best options among the team, because especially for the right side for the Stars, it has been a weakness for a long time, but if Lundkvist is able to break out, that does wonders for that entire team. Onto the Minnesota Wild, and the X factor for me has to be Kirill Kaprizov. Now, there's a few really good options as well for many, but Kaprizov is going to be the talk of Minnesota throughout the course of this season, of course, with his unsigned contract status. As I've said before, I do still lean towards him re-signing in Minnesota, but it's kind of an open book right now, and he might be waiting to see how Minnesota does this next year to decide his future. But he's also a pretty big part of it because he hasn't been playing every single game these last few seasons, only playing 41 this last year, getting 25 goals and 56 points, still looking good and started out amazingly, but wasn't able to complete the full season. But having a full year of Minnesota would do so much for them in their playoff race in that Central Division. They were already a pretty strong playoff team without Kaprizov for half the year, so hopefully if he's back for the full season, that's able to really boost Minnesota's fate, because they're going to need it to try to convince him to stay. Now that segues perfectly onto last week's member poll, where I asked you guys, the members on the channel, where do you think Kaprizov goes next if he were to leave Minnesota? 66% of you guys said the New York Rangers, while 33% said the Carolina Hurricanes, so a pretty big difference there towards New York, which is interesting. Now the community poll for the members here for this week that'll be featured on a video next week is about the MVP race and who you guys see winning the Hart Trophy. 3 options here between Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Clayton Keller also is an underrated one, plus an other section if you guys want to comment below any of your picks as well that might be different than those guys. If you remember, just go in the community tab and make your vote heard, and we'll see the results in next week's video. If you guys want to become a member to help support the channel and have your voice be heard in the weekly polls, you can become a member by hitting the join button next to the subscribe button or hitting the description link down below. And just for a couple bucks a month, you can get exclusive videos every single week, plus be able to have your input made on the member polls, exclusive emoji, exclusive roles as well in the Discord. So a lot there to really sink your teeth into. But let's get back into the X-Factor picks here, and let's go on to the Nashville Predators, and my pick is going to be UC Saros, and this isn't really even close to me. Saros, I think, needs to have a breakout rebound season for Nashville to stand much of a chance in the playoff race. That forward group has massive issues, especially now with Evangelista holding out, but I mean, that's not exactly what Nashville needed. The defense has some parts that are improved. I like Perbix a decent bit, but I don't think he's going to be changing that defense much. Saros, I think, needs to break out back into the 2022, 2021 type of level we saw out of him. He hasn't quite been able to get there these last couple of seasons, especially this last year. We got an 896 save percentage in 58 games, just looked extremely average for his reputation. But I think there is still a great goaltender in here, a top 10 one. I just want to see him get back to that because Nashville really badly needs it. Onto the St. Louis Blues, they have quite a few pretty obvious options. Jimmy Snuggerud would probably be the biggest X factor, but I've already talked about him so much. I wanted to also talk about Philip Broberg, who I think could also be a big X factor. He's someone that we did see break out in a pretty major way for St. Louis, playing a lot bigger minutes and looking a lot more confident within him, but he only played 68 games, got 29 points in those games, looked pretty good, and the playoffs played all 7, but I really want to see him have a full body of health this next year, because I think for St. Louis's defense, that structure they have is one of the biggest strengths for them, especially after Montgomery was hired. We saw how good Cam Fowler was there too. So Broberg can really lock down that middle pairing spot, really be that great lefty behind Fowler. I think that is just such a perfect thing for St. Louis. Plus, he's 24 years old, is probably going to get a little bit better too if he's fully healthy as well. So that's something I desperately want to see. Now onto the Utah Mammoth, and they have quite a few players who I think could really propel them into the playoffs if they were to have a successful season. But one guy that I mean kind of gets overlooked on that team is Lawson Crouse, and overlooked for good reason because he's somebody that had a pitiful year last season. Only 12 goals, 18 points in 81 games, especially when you compare that to the past 2 seasons before that, where he got 40 plus points in back-to-back years, 20 plus goals in back-to-back years. This was a player that didn't even look close to the same with the move to Utah. But this is somebody that has the potential to be a bulldozer out there, to put up some great physical numbers as well as goal scoring totals, and we just weren't really able to see that competitiveness in this last year. But hopefully we'll see that improved this season, as I think Utah desperately needs that bottom 6 to get a little bit better. That top end with guys like Keller and Cooley are going to be brilliant, but that second layer of scoring is, I think, one of the bigger question marks for this Utah team, but a Crouse breakout season would certainly alleviate that. Now on to the final team in the Central, in the Winnipeg Jets, and here is a pretty obvious one, but it is Jonathan Toews. I mean, as much as Winnipeg has a great core around them, I think that center situation is always continually a question mark for me, especially now with Adam Lowry gone for the start of the season. That center core is going to really be tested. Nemestikov has had some good stretches here and there, but he's going to be one that will have to have another great season. Toews, though, could be a second-line center for this Jets team, and if he is, it's going to be a lot of responsibility for a player that hasn't played in a while now. With Toews pretty much penciled in as that second line center right now, even though he has had a good training camp and has looked pretty good there, playing in NHL games in an 82 game year is a complete different story, especially for somebody that, again, hasn't played since 2023, and I would argue wasn't even fantastic in those last couple of years. He had some good moments still, and still is Jonathan Toews. He can still handle himself, especially in the faceoff dot, but I think there's going to be a pretty big uphill battle to play 20 minutes a night every single game, day in and day out, and still be the Jonathan Toews from the past. I see him being fine. I see him being a decent center, but maybe not exactly what Winnipeg needs. But hey, if he's able to fill a second line center role, that changes everything completely for Winnipeg, because the rest of the team really is fantastic. Let's get started in the Pacific Division and onto the Anaheim Ducks, and pretty easily the biggest X factor for them is the Mason McTavish situation, and when this contract ends up getting signed. I mean, he's skating with the Ottawa 67s, so it doesn't really seem like things are particularly close, which it's not the greatest news. Anaheim, I think, can survive without McTavish. They have Leo Carlson, Ryan Strome, and maybe even Mikael Granlund could play center minutes if he really needs to, but it's not ideal still, I don't think, for them, and especially with how good McTavish has been for them recently. 52 points this last year, 22 goals, providing the physical prowess that he has, and the just bulldog mentality that he brings. He's exactly what I think Anaheim needs, and that style of game that they want to bring more of. So not having somebody like that, who I think could be a future captain for them, is a little bit rough, and maybe shines the light on maybe less captain material. Who knows? Onto the Calgary Flames and my biggest X factor for them. Now, this is not what I would usually do, but I'm going to go with Dustin Wolf here. And I know how good Dustin Wolf is. I think he is one of the best up-and-coming goaltenders out there. But I do worry just a little bit that if he declines even a little bit, Calgary might be in a tough spot here. He had a .910 save percentage in 53 games, was one of the biggest reasons why Calgary was so close to the playoffs, and I think he is going to be a franchise goaltender. I think already is, but looking at that goaltending situation, I'm not super confident in it right now. The reason why I think Dustin Wolf is going to be such a fascinating player to watch is because of the other goaltending options Calgary has, which is pretty barren. I mean, Vladar, it wasn't exactly an unbelievable goaltender or anything, but I think as a backup, he could play a bunch of games and have a good amount of responsibility and be okay in them at the very least. But you have Ivan Prosvetov, who looks to be the backup position right now, but the most games he's played in an AHL year was 11, and that was with the Avs back in 2024. You also have Devin Cooley in this system, but the most he played was 6 games for San Jose in 2024, and I don't think you can rely on him to be an NHL goaltender at this stage. So I think in terms of the backup options Wolf has to deal with, it's not exactly great. I want to see Wolf take another step and really solidify himself as somebody that can play 60 NHL games and be one of the best goaltenders out there, but he's still super young, is just in his second NHL season, and with the backup options, I fear that he might end up being burnt out just a little bit by the end of the year, and that's just not what I want to see happen. Moving on to the Edmonton Oilers X Factor, and I could just go with Isaac Howard here. Pretty simple bet. I could just say the entire wing group for the Edmonton Oilers, honestly. I mean, you have also Savoy there as a younger player. Vasily Podkolzin, who the heck knows? Is Caplan going to be able to replicate the magic he had at points last year? There's just a ton of weird, interesting things going on with that Edmonton forward group right now. Obviously, center-wise, you got players like Draisaitl and McDavid, and Nugent Hopkins can be a wing at times, so he'll be a good option. But I think Howard is one of the players Edmonton needs to succeed the absolute most. Obviously, somebody that they traded for this offseason in exchange for Sam O'Reilly. Somebody that I like, though, a ton when it comes to the top-end skill and speed. Just kind of putting it together at the pros is still going to be a big question mark for him, because at points in the rookie tournament, at points in the preseason, it hasn't all been there. He did have a nice goal recently, though, so hopefully he's able to build on that. But I think Edmonton really needs him to be up to even a top 6 wing level, and I think that's asking a lot still of somebody that is as young as he is. At the same time, though, of how cap-strapped Edmonton is, they almost need young players like this on their lower cap deals to come in and take major spots in the team. So from that perspective, I understand it. On to the LA Kings and their X Factor, and to me, it is easily Brandt Clarke. Something that we talked about recently, having a solid preseason so far, having a great assist on that Turcotte goal, which I love to see. The high-end energy and deking ability is among the best out there for defensemen, and he's something that was able to get into a bigger role this last year, playing 78 games, 33 points, and now, with Jordan Spence traded, the red carpet has been flown out for him. I look at that defense, though, and it is so much built to play defensive. You have Mikey Anderson, you have Joel Edmondson, you have Brian Dumoulin, you have Cody Ceci. There's not a lot of offense coming from that group. Drew Doughty can still hold his own there, but I think Brandt Clarke has the opportunity to really be the play driver there. Kind of have a Lane Hudson moment from last year where he gets all the opportunity for all those offensive moments and generation, and I think he's going to do a lot of good with it. And they need him to, because if Clarke isn't producing offense, not many of the other defensemen will. Onto the San Jose Sharks and another young player here. I got to go with Yaroslav Askarov. Now, so many options for San Jose. Michael Misa is a big one, of course. Will Celebrini be able to replicate or improve upon his season? Will Will Smith be able to produce like he did in the second half through the course of the season? Will Sam Dickinson get a role with the Sharks? We'll wait and see on that. But Askarov is pretty much locked in as the starter for the San Jose team, at least as of right now. But this is the year I think he can really seize that opportunity and be a big-time Calder candidate. Somebody that I've loved for a long time in terms of the electricity in goal. He's always been a super fun goaltender to watch, but hasn't yet been able to put that together consistently at the NHL level. He had an 896 save percentage in San Jose last year, which wasn't the worst thing in the world. Kind of the similar situation to Spencer Knight, where he started out pretty well, and then those last few games wasn't quite at the level you wanted. But I think he is primed for a really unique opportunity here. Still not going to have the greatest save percentage in the world, considering the defense options he has, but I just want him to really be the full-time starter there and still look like he has energy throughout the course of the season. And I think as long as he's able to stay healthy, that's kind of all I want right now. Onto the Seattle Kraken, and a player that I've really come to enjoy over these last couple of seasons, seeing the development curve he's had, and that is Yanni Niemann, somebody that I think could be, and kind of under the radar goal scorer for the Seattle team. And man, do they need somebody like this to come into the team, really work that power play and do what he does best. I mean, at 6'4", 220 pounds, he's always kind of had that physical build, but I think what we've seen in the anticipation to play, the speed at which he plays the game, he has really been able to improve that over, really especially since his draft year. I liked him back in his draft year, but he wasn't a top prospect for me, but he's really starting to prove himself as that. I mean, in 2024, he was brilliant in the Liga. This last year was unbelievable in the AHL, getting 28 goals, 44 points in his first season. But this year, it seems like he's going to get a pretty big opportunity on the Seattle team, and with how good he was in the 12 games he played, I'm not exactly surprised. He also had 2 goals in that preseason game. The one-timer is just unbelievable for him, so I could see him getting a lot of opportunity, especially on that power play, to just cook as much as he wants. Next up, we move on to the Vancouver Canucks, and their biggest X factor is Elias Pettersson, but I feel like I've talked about Elias Pettersson rebounding for months now, and I think I've had enough for now, so I'm going to go for the second place spot, and that is Thatcher Demko. I've also talked about Demko quite a bit, but not as much as Elias Pettersson, and that's what matters here. But I think Demko is just such a fascinating goaltender because when he is on, when he is healthy, there's very few goaltenders that can match up to the level he is capable of, but has kind of had a healthy great season and a not so healthy season and a great healthy season and a not so healthy season. It kind of feels like a coin flip every single season, but you can see an 89 save percentage last year, 23 games, not the season he wanted after 918 save percentage the year before that. But I think for Vancouver, obviously Pettersson is a massive X factor for that forward group, but I think for that complete team to come together, you need Demko to have a fully healthy year. I like Lankinen. He's capable of solid things as a fringe starter, but I just don't think he's quite at that level. Demko absolutely is, though, and if he is healthy, I think that changes so much for Vancouver and hopefully gives Quinn Hughes a little bit less of a depressing time. On to the last Pacific Division team here, though, in the Vegas Golden Knights, and here is where I have Mitch Marner. Not really many Vegas Golden Knights that I think are going to be massive X factors that are really going to be balancing that team, whether or not they do well. But Marner fitting into that system, I think, is going to be a massive thing for them. I don't really have many concerns, though, that they will. I mean, him and Jack Eichel are going to be a fantastic duo, and I would not be surprised if maybe both of them hit 100 points. Let's move on to the Eastern Conference here, though, and start out in the Metro, and onto the Carolina Hurricanes. My X factor for them is Logan Stankoven, who might be a center now, interestingly. We'll see if that actually ends up sticking, but Stankoven is kind of a big part of this Canes offense. Now, if he's going to be a center, it really adds to the responsibility there. Didn't really expect him to be a center at any point in his career, but it's interesting to see for sure. The energy has always been among my favorites, the intensity, and just how much he's able to will his way to pucks and around the net. For the Canes, it seemed to fit pretty well, especially in the playoffs where he got 8 points, 5 goals, 15 games. Translating that to a full NHL season, hopefully having a breakout year, getting past the 40-point plateau, hopefully. That's going to be huge for him. I think taking that next step is really vital for that Canes offense. Onto the Columbus Blue Jackets. My X factor is another pretty easy one in Jet Greaves on the goaltending side. Now, you can also have Elvis in this spot too, but I mean, Greaves is kind of one that I'm just, it's honestly, like, we're just talking about like top 15, top 20 most interested to watch players this next year. Greaves would probably be top 10 for me. He's so interesting because the career path has been extraordinary, going from an OHL goaltender who was decent to the AHL, where he's really been able to almost improve his game, it feels like, and he's really been growing, taking his time down there, seasoning his game. And you can see this last season in 11 NHL games, a .938 save percentage was one of the main reasons why Columbus stuck in that playoff race and made things so close. He was right there, and also impeccable in the AHL and in the AHL playoffs, of course. But he's somebody that I think has the opportunity to become Columbus's starter, to have a really solid rookie season, and I think he's going to. Next up, we go into the New Jersey Devils, and this team has a few really good options. I debated between Simon Nemec with Luke Hughes out, him kind of being a younger offensive defenseman, but ultimately I did go for Arseny Gritsuk, who I think will become a fan favorite pretty quickly for the Devils, and rightfully so. He has been one of the more underrated prospects for a long time now, and now finally signed onto the NHL. He's going to get a pretty big opportunity in that middle six to really cook. Moving on now to the New York Islanders, and they're a team also that has a ton of X factors. You could pretty easily see Matthew Schaefer in this spot, but I would say even at his best, I don't think he's going to be a true needle mover for them this year. Ultimately, he will end up being that for them, but I don't think he's going to really change the tides for them too much. One that I could see having a big impact, though, is Jonathan Drouin, and this is somebody that has always kind of been a rebound pick. Oh, what if he actually breaks out and becomes the player we know he can be? I think in the Islanders system, though, there's opportunity. There is so much room for him to be that type of player. it's just about staying healthy, man. Because what we saw in 2024 was spectacular, playing with the Avs' best players, getting 56 points in 79 games. We wanted to see more of that, and then again, he wasn't able to stay healthy last year, playing only 43 games, getting 37 points, and again, being close to a point per game. Just the health again was ruining the stock. But in the Islander system, maybe he ends up playing with Bohora, maybe he ends up playing with Barzal. We'll see what ends up happening there. But I thought he looked pretty good already, and that speed, of course, that we know from him is still up to a great level. On to the New York Rangers, a player that I need to actually start performing again, and that is Alexis Lafreniere. Oh boy, this is going to be, if he does not get at least like 60 points this next year, the conversations around him are going to be so toxic. I am so ready for it though. Of course, as a former first overall pick, Lafreniere has had some pretty weird ups and downs. He had a really solid breakout season in 2024 where we finally start to get a glimmer of what we thought he was capable of, getting 28 goals, 57 points, and in the playoffs, 14 points in 16 games. Love to see that out of him. And then this last year, 45 points. He looked better at the second half, I would say, but wasn't able to get to 20 goals, and defensively the energy just wasn't quite there. It was just a disappointing all around year for him, and my goodness, man, he really needs to turn the page, because otherwise I think things are going to get a little bit rough for his reputation at least. Advancing on to Philadelphia, let's go on to the biggest X factor, who I would say is Trevor Zegras, but like Vancouver and Pettersson, I've talked about Zegras to death. So let's go to his best friend in Jamie Drysdale, who I think is in a very unique position heading into this season, because he's still pretty young at 23 years old, but just has yet to replicate what he was able to do in his rookie year back in 2022, getting 32 points in 81 games. He was able to play 70 games this last year, not a full season, but as close to as he's gotten back to 2022, so at least there was that. But there was still some pretty bad defensive deficiencies, and the offense wasn't quite at the level to necessarily make that any better. But at this point in Philly's current rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it, they're just looking for players to establish themselves, to really show what they're capable of, and really show the strengths that they have. And Drysdale, I think, is in a unique position where he does have very clear, obvious strengths that maybe he hasn't quite had the confidence in at the NHL level so far. But Philly is just giving the opportunity to these young guys, and I'm hoping that Drysdale runs with it. On to Pittsburgh, and somebody that I think will be a pretty under-the-radar Calder candidate this year, and Ville Koivunen. And he's somebody that I think could be a pretty interesting middle six piece for the Pens this next season, and give a lot of those vets a run for their money. He's somebody that is also, like Neiman, took some pretty big steps over the last couple of seasons, becoming a great Liga player, and then this last season being dominant at the AHL level for Wilkes-Barre, getting 56 points in 63 games, a point per game also in the playoffs, even though it was only 2 games. But this guy is just such a good playmaker. His vision, his creativity is off the charts. He's somebody that does play a little bit undersized, but I think knows that in ways. He kind of works around that and is able to get around pressure pretty well. So he's somebody that I think could be pretty pro ready and NHL ready this next season already. And considering the Penguins situation, considering where they're at in their franchise, I think giving the opportunity to guys like Koivunen is a no-brainer. And hopefully in that top 6, you'll get some interesting players to play with and hopefully boost those numbers up a bit. On to the Washington Capitals, a team that was pretty hard to choose for, I would say, mostly because so many of their players have already done so well in 2025. But Anthony Beauvillier was somebody that I wanted to give a shout to because I really enjoyed watching him play for the Caps in the playoffs. He got 2 goals, 6 points in 10 games, looked to really gel for that team. Even in the regular season, he wasn't spectacular or anything. He's somebody that I think could make a pretty big difference. He's somebody that is always had such great speed and intensity when he is on his game, but has gone through so many teams, so many franchises since he left the Islanders. I just kind of want to see him stick and find a permanent home. It's time to move on to the Atlantic Division and go on to the Boston Bruins, a team that I feel like is filled with X factors. That entire team, it feels like, is an X factor. But Jeremy Swayman is easily the top one to me, just because of the difference of play we've seen in his career recently. He was somebody that was building up to become one of the best NHL goaltenders out there. And then in 2025, after entering the season late, put up an .892 save percentage in 58 games, and was one of the main reasons for Boston's downfall. It just felt like he was never able to gain momentum, and for a goaltender, that is the kiss of death. It is exactly the last thing you want. But I think Swayman, now entering the season with training camps and everything, getting a lot more work under him before the year, I think will do him a lot of good. I don't know if we'll quite see the .920 save percentage that we've seen in the past, considering Boston's kind of all over the place right now, but having a good structure and Swayman helping that would do wonders for Boston, being a little bit more competitive this time. On to the Buffalo Sabres, another team pretty filled with X factors, but even though I think the easy answer is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen on the goaltending side, I did also want to give a shout to Michael Kesselring, who is, I think still one of the more underrated players out there. Of course, was part of the landmark JJ Peterka trade, and a lot of people were like, who the heck is this? I think Kesselring was a great player for Utah, especially considering the injuries we saw on that team. He was given a lot of responsibility, and I thought looked really good with that. Got 29 points, 82 games. For somebody that is as big as he moves the puck well, skates incredibly well. It's just super smart and dependable in the games he plays, and has just gotten so much better in his career over the past couple of seasons. Still some room to grow for sure on the offensive side. I think in Buffalo with that middle pair, especially alongside Owen Power, I think he'll be exactly what that Buffalo defense needs, though maybe not quite enough to make the playoffs yet. Onto the Detroit Red Wings, and they're a team that offensively I have some question marks with, but goaltending-wise, they need to go after somebody, and they went after John Gibson, who is going to have a lot of expectations and a lot of weight on his shoulders, especially with the defense that I still think is a bit rough here and there. Gibson's going to have a lot to work with, but also a lot to work against. He's somebody that, in terms of the games played, is all over the place, because his best hockey was played this last year, where he only played 29 games, getting a .912 save percentage, a 2.77 goals against average, looking better, but that was in a backup role. Can he be able to get back to the starter level and be a good starter again? That is the question, because he hasn't really been since probably 2020, 2019. Yes, Anaheim's defense hasn't been great around him, but I think he's been one of the bigger reasons why Anaheim has kind of sunk over these last few years. Can he recapture that magic in Detroit? We'll just have to wait and see, but I'm really hoping so, because the Red Wings need it really bad, especially on the goaltending side that has kind of been a inconsistent mess these last few years. Onto the Florida Panthers, and now with the confirmed Matthew Tkachuk injury taking him out for the first couple of months of the season, I think a wing and a young wing like Mackie Samoskevich is going to have a lot of opportunity here to really produce. And I thought he looked good in his first full NHL season, getting 31 points in 72 games, a really underrated rookie, put up some great individual advanced stats too, and looked good in the limited role he had. But now he could be potentially in the top 6, potentially on that second line, and with the center options Florida has, I think that could do him a lot of good. So going from maybe an extra / fourth liner to top 6 minutes, I think could really boost Samoskevic's stock, and good for it, because he's always been a really talented player. On to the biggest X factor for the Montreal Canadiens. You guys already know the answer here. It is Kirby Dach, pretty easily. That center situation scares me for Montreal. That is one of the biggest reasons why I see them just barely missing the playoffs. Kirby Dach, though, having a rebound season would do... I can't even describe how much it would lift Montreal's playoff aspirations, because the rest of the team has really good options and weapons and interesting players to work with, up-and-coming guys. Dach, though, has kind of always felt a bit of an odd man out, especially with the injuries he's faced. He looked great in the 2 games he played in 2024 that he got injured and was out for the rest of the year. Then he got back to the swing of things a little bit this last season, but didn't really look particularly good, especially on the defensive side. In terms of the energy, it wasn't quite there. It felt like he was playing a bit scared, and we'll see if that ends up changing. I'm not totally confident in that, but my goodness, if Dach is just able to put up like a 50-point season, that would change so much for them. On to the Ottawa Senators, and a big-time rival for the Habs in the playoff race this next year. My X factor for them, though, is going to come on the goaltending side and go on to backup Levi Merilainen, who looks to be kind of another underrated rookie for this race here. On the goaltending side, I think is somebody that has always had some great seasons, has been able to put up some good stretches in the AHL recently, too. A .913 save percentage last year for Belleville in 37 games. He's somebody, though, that in the NHL this last season put up a .925 save percentage in 12 games, looked pretty good at points, and had some great games, individual games. We'll see if Merilainen, though, being tasked with that backup spot, is going to be able to pick up that amount of games and do well under Ullmark. On to the Tampa Bay Lightning and their X factor for this season. I'm going to go for another younger player here and go for Gage Gonzalez, who is somebody that is another one that does not have much name value or recognition out there, but I thought it had a pretty solid season for Tampa Bay when he did play last year. 20 points in 60 games, and was almost a point per game in the playoffs too. 4 points in 5 games. Had some good individual moments and was insane in the AHL. 18 points in 14 games is incredible production there. Tampa Bay just loves their no name value guys that they just make into really interesting players, and Gonzalez I could see being the next one in that very long line. Finishing us off as the last X Factor today, we go into the Toronto Maple Leafs, and my X Factor for them has to be Matias Maccelli. Not exactly one that I haven't talked about before. I've liked Maccelli for a long time, dating back to his draft year. I had him as a second rounder back in my rankings. He's become a really interesting product, especially as a playmaker, but as somebody that has a lot to prove this next year for Toronto. I mean, in Arizona, you kind of had the Lawson Crouse effect where he was really becoming an interesting, fascinating playmaker. Then, first season in Utah, not exactly what you want wanted to see. Only 55 games, 18 points, wasn't really trusted much within that coaching staff. But in Toronto, he has all the potential to be a first-line player alongside an Austin Matthews and to really look good there with his speed, with his creativity. Again, I think Maccelli, when it comes to high-end passes, is among the best in the league. Seriously, what he is capable of is extraordinary. I just want to see him be a bit more effective and a bit more consistent with it. And if he is, even though he's not going to replace Marner's production, it would go a long way to doing so. But those are my 32 X factors for every single team heading into the year. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed the video and enjoyed the breakdowns, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, notification bell. Comment down below your thoughts on your team's X factor, whether you agree or disagree with my pick and what you see potentially being the biggest X factor for your team. Of course, if you guys want to support the channel even more, you can become a member by hitting the join button or hitting the link in the description down below to become a part of the names on the screen right here. Thank you guys to all for all that. And of course, the member polls that we'll be doing here on the channel every single week, plus the exclusive new videos. So all of that is appreciated. And of course, if you want to share the video with more people out there, you can hit the share button and get the link out there to more people. And if you want to watch more videos, you can hit on this card right here for more hockey rankings. And I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic hockey day, or else. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.